and you're with Tina Nixon, standing in for Michael Laws on the platform. And our guest in the studio is Charles Finny. Charles works for Saunders Unsworth, a well-known lobby and government relations firm here in Wellington. And in a prior life, Charles was also the head of the Wellington Chamber, I think it was called in those old days.
Yep.
And a commentator on a number of issues as well. He is well versed in trade policy as a particular, because you were overseas diplomat.
Yep. Yeah, many years.
Yeah. So he does come from that sort of background of understanding that international politics and also local politics. But I was keen to catch up with Charles and talk about the public service here in Wellington and what it's looking like at the moment, because it seems to have got rather large and rather inefficient. So, Charles, what's your view of just what's happening with New Zealand's public service at the moment?
Well, you're right. It's large, a whole lot larger than it was in 2017 when this government essentially first came into office. It's up around about 30%, I believe. And on top of the core public service growing, we have a huge number of consultants being employed by a number of government agencies. My concern actually is, it's partly around the size of the public service and its productivity, but it's also the fact that they're not actually in Wellington as much as they should be. And one of the things you'll notice when walking around Wellington is a whole lot of businesses that were essentially operated on the basis of foot traffic during the day that have had to close up. And I point the finger squarely at work from home, which is, it was essential to do that during COVID, and we survived doing it. But we need to get the public service back into the Wellington CBD, otherwise there are going to be dire long-term consequences. Yeah,
I mean, I keep saying this because, I live and work in Masterton from home, and I travel, probably two weeks out of every month I'm on the road somewhere as a consultant and a whole raft of different things. But coming here has been quite sad because of the state of the shops. And so many of those old haunts are closed down or are on the bones of their ass, and it's had an impact on service as well. So, that old lunch crowd that, has always sort of been out there, it's gone. There's hardly any people that do that. We certainly obviously have a mayor here who's quite keen to uphold those old traditional values of long lunches. She's doing her thing. She sure is. But it is. It's hollowed right out. So how do you get round it? Because I have some friends who like working from home a lot, and I think probably are quite productive, and policy writers, I think, and some sort of technocrats may fit that bill. But there are others, I think, are just hiding at home.
Look, I know a lot of senior public servants. We talk all the time about this issue. They're frankly as appalled as I am by what is going on, and their main concern is about productivity. So yes, there are some fantastic, very productive public servants who are able to work from home and do work from home and are absolutely fastidious about giving value for money. I think they're probably frustrated by what they're seeing as well. And what worries me most is actually there are a whole lot of quite junior public servants who joined the public service out of university in the COVID era, and they're probably not picking up the habits that would be best for a long-term career in this space because of the current dynamic. So it's not just those of us from outside the public service who are pulling their hair out. It's happening from inside as well. So I think one thing that could happen is that the Public Service Commission could make public service chief executives accountable in the space and demand that they bring their staff back in more than they're doing right now.
Yeah. And I suppose that also brings up another point too. One of the things that I've seen is the growth, and it was because I think we had that sort of full employment. So people could negotiate their contracts, and a lot, including me, I would never work 5 days again. But I'm of that age where that's probably okay. But a lot of younger people won't either. And so you have a lot of public servants who start with only working 4 days a week, and then out of that, 2 days will be at home. And so the rise of the 4-day week, I think, has never been measured. And I've talked to a couple of economists on that point. I think it's something that needs looking at as to what impact it's actually having.
Yeah, I'm on a board of a company that during COVID had to come down to it's a manufacturing company. It made sense to go to 4 days a week. We've stretched the amount of hours in that, so we're still doing the same number of hours, but over a 4-day period, become much more productive actually as a result. So it can be done the right way. But my concern is actually the impact on the Wellington CBD. And this is great for the Wairarapa, it's great for the Kapiti Coast, it's great for the suburbs. And you're seeing a whole lot of new activity there, which is great. But once the heart of your city starts dying, and I can see that there are symptoms there which could lead to this in Wellington and actually to a certain extent Auckland as well, you are going to have major social problems.
Yeah.
And on top of this dynamic we're talking about, work from home, we've got the prospect, unless someone stops it, of this so-called the misnomer of the century, let's get Wellington moving. And as we've seen in Auckland with the work being done underground there, this is going to become a whopping great building site as well as a desert with no one working in it. So all kinds of social problems are going to be occurring. And you work in a particular part of town here, and you see it every day. It's not as safe all day to work through here. There are drug deals going on on the street out here, on the park behind you.
These guys, these young ones here, the staff, they've had feces chucked at them. They've been attacked. They've been verbally attacked. They've been stopped. And and Sean has consistently rang the police and rang the council and said, you've got to do something. And there is a lot of homeless people in this little tiny precinct here in the Manor Street.
Absolutely. You're in Ground Zero. Goes down to about Tory Street, I'm told. And
really?
Yes. So not the safe place I want the CBD to be. So that's my primary concern.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a wider issue around the size of the public service, value for money. Are you noticing improved outcomes as a result of this blowout in public service numbers? I'm not.
I can't see any better service in any government department. I'd have to declare an interest. I'm actually doing a little contract at the moment to try and make one small section of one government department better. And it's a struggle. It really is a struggle. And it's not because the people aren't good. It's just that they've got into this loop of process rather than outcomes. It's as simple as that, actually.
Yeah.
And so they end up in this busyness stuff, but not actually doing the stuff.
Yeah. Look, I think that post-election, regardless of who wins, you're going to see some activity in this space.
Yeah.
I'm told that a number of agencies have been told they've got a 5% cut, so they're going to be looking at their costs that will involve people, and I think they're going to have to look at productivity, and they're going to have to conclude that maybe more people in the office being properly managed is the way forward.
Yeah, and the other thing is there's the lack of ability to be able to talk to a person in a government department. That is actually super difficult. So if you are trying to do get something that you require actually to talk to somebody in one of the public services, it's very, very difficult to find a person. And the other issue is media. I don't know whether you guys will probably have to deal with some of the media, but you try and find a comms person inside a government department. You've got to actually email them half of the time before they'll even talk to you.
Which is quite amazing because the number of comms people inside government departments has gone through the roof. I used to be a public servant and I don't think we had anyone. We did it all ourselves. And now you find there are 50 people there supposedly managing comms. No, it's amazing, and it's not as if this was meant to be the most open and transparent government ever. That we're in that mode. It seems to be to protect the information as opposed to ensure that there's a good dialogue going on and full flow of information about what's going on.
Yeah, and then of course the rise of the excess, and we've seen that with both Pacific Island Affairs and today with DIA. I don't know whether you've read the post, but I thought that was a bit of a stunner. So basically the Deputy Chief Executive, Karen Vercoe, had a porphyry, 300 people, $17,000.
Yeah, well, that's the second example of that type of incident in recent times, it's wonderful that the public service is increasingly focused on biculturalism, but I really worry that maybe that's become too dominant a feature. And we need to be getting back to basics and focusing on getting the job done.
I'd have to agree with you, and I'm a Ngaitahu, but we always say that we're sick of having the karakias and actually not getting the outcomes. And that's actually happening. So Maori are seeing it too. They're seeing there's a lot of lip service that takes up a lot of time. There's actually almost offensive because it doesn't mean anything when the real outcomes that they're trying to drive are not getting done because nobody's doing the work.
Yeah, I want to see better delivery, quicker delivery of better outcomes for everyone in society, particularly Maori. And unfortunately, being able to sing a waiata and behave properly at a porphyry is not all you have to do. You actually have to do something on top of that, and that is deliver. And I'm not seeing as much delivery as I'd like to see.
No, and a $17,000 porphyry for a Deputy Chief Executive is just off the chart stupid. And where is Peter Hughes? Where is the Public Service Commission in all this?
Well, Peter Hughes is a good person. I've dealt with him many times over the years, but this is a role that he could show perhaps some real leadership on, particularly bringing people back to the office. I think he's probably finishing before too long. It's a key appointment for the next government, whoever it is, to get that position right. And,
that's a good point.
I want real leadership from the Public Service Commission.
Yeah. Do you think there'll be some resistance to this, though? I mean, at the end of the day, there's some, your good sort of average policy person's on 120, 130K, working from home 2 days a week, often 4 day weeks. You don't really want to upset that apple cart. So how are you going to do the change?
Yeah, I think there will be resistance. And, I posted something on social media last week about this and got huge viewership. It was great.
Went viral.
But the comments were mixed, and there were as many in favour as opposed to my views in the space. I'm sure I'm going to get hate mail as a result of agreeing to be on your station and even talking to you. But that's okay. I'm thick-skinned. I don't care anymore. I just want the best for the New Zealand economy.
Yeah.
And we have to do something differently to get there.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point because I think both National and ACT have signalled that they want to tackle this issue. I honestly don't think they really truly understand how bad it is and how quickly it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and I hope they take some time as if they are elected, still pretty close, if they are elected, or even if we have a continuation of the current government, because they have to do something about this too. I'm sure they know they have to do something about this to before they take decisions, because new ministers coming in, they get a briefing for the incoming government from the public service. Seek advice on it. Don't just accept the advice from the from your department heads.
Yeah.
In fact, I was reading Stephen Joyce's book, which came out a week or so ago. I strongly commend it, and he tells a really good tale about NZTA trying to get him to sign off on a document early on in his time, and what would have happened if he'd done that without taking that extra time. But I think there's some really tough questions all ministers should be asking of their officials.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will happen.
And the one good thing I would say too is if you do get a change of government, they've done a lot of the spade work previously, because they'll have used OIAs to find out some of this information. So they're sitting on a minefield or a gold mine of information around where the shortcomings are, or should be able to pinpoint them a lot quicker.
Yeah, look, I wasn't at the, and actually haven't read the full document from the ACT Party over the weekend when they released their policy, but they've obviously, from what I've read, done a lot of homework, and I know that I think it's Simeon Brown, who is the National Party spokesman. He's all over this as well. So yes, I think they're very well informed. Yeah, and I do think that some people who have a fair idea of what their portfolios might be, should they become government, are thinking in this space, which is good to see.
The other thing, though, is we've got, I think, three pieces of big pieces of work that they're going to have to do, and that is the public service, roll back of Three Waters, and sort some of the RMA stuff out. That is seriously big stuff, and there's a lot of work involved to do all of those three. If you were going to choose one, which would it be?
Well, I'd add a fourth. I'd get rid of the Fair Pay Agreement legislation first. Then, because that's going to cause real problems.
And why is it going to cause problems?
Because it's winding back the clock. Yep. We're going to be back into the sort of industrial relations era we luckily escaped from in the mid-1980s. We don't need to have New Zealand-wide collective agreements across all these industries. I think there is perhaps an argument in favour of them at the very low paid space.
Yep.
But at higher value industries, no. It's just going to increase cost and deliver suboptimal results. But I think that the National Party has signalled that they will, by Christmas, according to Chris Bishop, have repealed the recently passed legislation in both Three Waters and RMA space.
Yeah.
There actually are some improvements in the new RMA space, but I think that it's probably good news for the lawyers.
Yes.
There'll be 10 years of litigation while we determine what some of the new terms actually really mean, and it's a pity it's so extensive as well. You know, so many pages of legislation. I think it could have been improved greatly with some very simple simplification.
Yeah. I was talking about this at a course a few weeks ago. I mean, Te Mana o Te Wai statements and Te Mana o Te Tau, they're going to be pivotal in charting the direction and how things are defined from a Maori perspective. I don't think anyone realises how difficult that is going to be to get some collective voices around those that will agree to what they actually are. No one's defined them. And Māori are in the process of that at the moment, and they're not certainly coming up with one sort of thing. So I think there's some major issues, just even for some sort of fundamental philosophical drivers in those pieces of legislation. So David Parker, he's left an interesting legacy in those three pieces of those two pieces of legislation.
They could possibly have benefited with deeper thought, and they've been working on it for quite some time. And I'm not sure that the Select Committee took full heed of the advice that many of us were proffering in that process. And this is such a fundamental change. It's pretty outrageous that you're given 10 minutes in the Select Committee to make your comments. I actually got a little bit longer for one of my clients, but even so, this is a really major change and has to be well thought through, and it hasn't come out exactly as even the most optimistic of people were hoping for.
Yeah, I must admit I found that process, because it was the first time I'd ever actually done a submission from the other side on Three Waters, and I did get extra time, and I had 2 bites of the cherry because I was involved with the Water Users Group as well. But yes, you're right. I mean, it's very much a once-over likely process. It's very hard to get across really big ideas in the timeframes that you have as a submitter. And admittedly, you can file, lots of supporting stuff, but that sort of instant soundbite stuff for the Select Committee, it's a really bugger of a process, really.
Well, what worries me most, because I sit there and listen to a lot of these submissions, is that people write their submission and then they read it. And the members of Parliament have already read it. So they're wasting this opportunity. There's no time for discussion left.
Yeah.
So I think the submitters actually could do a better job often of actually saying, okay, you've read what are your questions for me, but it's not a perfect process.
No, it's not and does that come back to the whole thing of, is Parliament still the institution fit for purpose that we need going into a sort of a much more technologically focused future, and a change in the way we even think, I reckon, and work?
No, I do think that the processes are improving greatly, and I think it was probably accelerated because of COVID, but you have a whole lot more people now able to submit remotely that were unable to submit before. So I think the previous situation where Parliament would usually just meet in Wellington, if you're lucky in Auckland as well, sometimes for major legislation, a few other venues around the country, but now anyone, no matter where they are, so long as they've got access to good broadband, is able to participate in that process. That's a really good thing, and I'd like to see more innovation of that type in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I did do Zooms on one of them, so it is possible, and it was an easy process, and it was relatively painless for somebody like me.
Well, I think, look, if you look around the world at the state of democracy, we're still in a pretty good state. Yeah. So I wouldn't go tinkering too much.
Your thoughts on American politics at the moment? Is Trump going to get there?
Who knows? I don't like making predictions about Donald J. Trump. I think that he is in a very strong position to get the Republican Party nomination, so long he's not inside the clanger or something. But that would be interesting. But I don't actually think that what is happening with all these cases is helping his case with the wider electorate. So every time that new charges are brought, there are fewer centrists who would be prepared to vote for him. So I think it's not going to be like the 2016 election this time around.
Yeah. Because, the shine's come off Biden too, in quick order, really, which is quite... I didn't expect that. I thought he would sort of just muddle on through, but it's pretty ugly.
No, it's really sad to see. It's a great shame that a great country, great democracy like the United States can't find a 45-year-old who is able to represent either the Republican or Democrat parties and run on a decent ticket. And a decent policy platform. The area that frustrates me most is my field of trade policy, where Trump looked inward and I think has done great long-term harm to the United States, if not the global economy. And Biden hasn't done anything to improve it. So neither side is performing as well as I would hope in that space. And I can't see anything coming out of this election that's going to change things much. I guess if Biden were to win, and Trump, true, but I don't think Trump will change his policies. But Biden wouldn't need to worry about re-election, and he perhaps could become a bit more adventurous. That impacts on New Zealand. Where it's amazing that we don't have a free trade agreement yet with the United States.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah. In terms of who's our biggest risk? We've got all of the stuff happening in Europe. We've got America, which is all over the paddock as well, and then we've got China and that block. Where do you see our biggest problem from a trade perspective in the next 10 years?
Well, I think the most immediate trade problem is the state of the Chinese economy. So put politics to one side. The Chinese economy isn't growing as quickly, hasn't recovered as well as we were hoping from COVID. It's always, we know in that there are problems in the property space, and that those chickens are coming home to roost. The Chinese government has just introduced a new stimulus package. Hopefully it will help. But it's obviously starting to impact on demand for some of our exports, and might also impact things like tourism and the ability of students to travel and study abroad. So all those would be negative for New Zealand. I think New Zealand's actually very well placed. We've got a good free trade agreement with China. We've got something like coming close to 80% of our exports now covered by free trade agreements. So and the UK outcome, I have to say, and this is, I'd say, the best thing this government has done. I think partly due to the work the Australians did in their agreement.
Right.
We've got an excellent agreement now with the UK, and there'll be a huge opportunity there for all bits of the New Zealand economy to sell to another high value market that was previously denied denied to us since about 1972. We I think have got a number of other options in Asia which can be developed further. I'm very pleased that we've got a delegation about to go off or just left for India. We need to do. I'm not talking about a free trade agreement, but we do need to take that country, that economy far more seriously and do business with them. And I was really pleased to read something Todd McClay wrote in the Herald the other day about what he would do if he was trade minister, and he's talking about the changing demographics globally. China is actually going to become a smaller country in terms of population. It will become, in per capita terms, much more wealthy and still be hugely important for us. But he's rightly recognising that India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, they're going to be enormously important, much bigger populations. And there's a rise of a number of jurisdictions in Africa, which essentially New Zealand ignores, and we can't do that for much longer. So it was really pleasing to see him recognise that and suggesting that if we do have a change of government, there'll be a bit more emphasis placed in that space too.
That's a good
we really need it.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, look, thanks very much for coming in, Charles. That was really interesting and enlightening. We'll no doubt know in a couple of months' time what the election's going to deliver us, and it will be an interesting end to what has been a fascinating election so far. I've certainly sort of got glued to most of the media, watching what's been happening and how it's rolling out and trying to make sense of it. So thanks very much for your thoughts on that, and here's hoping that one way or the other we get a much more efficient and productive public service.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.